The sun rose like a blade across the desert sky, slicing heat into the skin of the living and the dead alike. Martha Clay opened her eyes to light so bright it felt like a punishment. Her breath was shallow, her tongue thick with dust. The only sound was wind scraping over cracked earth and the crows. She tried to sit up but couldn't. Her left side screamed. Her right hand clutched a wooden cross, the one she'd carved with a butter knife. It was too small, barely longer than her palm, but it was all she could manage before the spade broke in the rocky soil. Her daughter lay beneath that shallow mound, wrapped in a patchwork quilt that had once hung by a hearth. Martha blinked back tears, crying wasted water. "Mama," a voice whispered, so small it almost didn't exist. It was Leia. She crouched beside the grave, her tiny hands wrapped around the neck of a broken doll. Her dress was stained with blood, not hers, thank God. Beside her sat Joey, his face smeared with dirt, his eyes hollowed by hunger and grief far too big for 9 years. Martha gritted her teeth and forced herself upright. Pain lanced through her ribs. She'd fallen from the wagon days ago, maybe cracked something, but there was no use thinking about that now. "They are not coming back, are they?" Joey asked, his voice flat. Not angry, not even surprised. Just done. Martha didn't answer. What was there to say? The settlers had left 2 days ago, after a vote around the fire. They'd argued that slowing for a wounded old woman and 2 extra mouths would cost them all. Disease had already taken 3. Bandits were rumored along the canyon trail. The prairie didn't forgive weakness, so they left them. A sack of jerky, a dented canteen, a broken spade. That was their mercy. Martha's first instinct had been rage, but it had burned out too quickly, replaced by something colder, something heavier. She was the last adult now, the last protector. If she died, the kids wouldn't make it past the next sundown. She forced her legs beneath her, wavering as the world swayed like a storm-tossed wagon. Joey stood fast and held her arm. His hand was small but steady. "Grandma, what do we do?" She looked out over the endless plain. Not a tree in sight. No smoke on the horizon, just heat shimmer, and the sky so blue it mocked them. "We move," she said. "We follow the ridge. There's water down there somewhere." "Are you sure?" "No," she said, brushing the hair from Leia's forehead. "But we don't have a better choice." The heat baked them as they walked. The earth cracked beneath their boots. Each step was a gamble. Would the next one bring shade, a stream, or just more nothing? By midday, the canteen was empty. Joey stopped asking for sips. Leia started to cry, then stopped crying too. Her silence was worse. Martha's head swam. Once, years ago, she'd read a newspaper article about a man who walked out of the Mojave with the soles of his feet melted. She thought of that man now. Wondered if he'd been as scared as she was. Wondered if he'd had children to protect. The ground rose slowly ahead. A low ridge, a hard climb, but maybe a better view. She gritted her teeth and pushed onward. Joey lifted Leia onto his back without complaint. "Good boy," Martha murmured. Halfway up the ridge, her knees buckled. She collapsed face first into the dust, the taste of earth flooding her mouth. Stars exploded behind her eyes. A dull, Cold fear crept up her spine. This is how it ends. Joey knelt beside her. Grandma. I'm fine, she wheezed. Just rest a minute. She tried to rise, failed. Her breath was short. Her arms felt full of lead. Leave me. Take your sister and go, she said. The words hurt more than the fall. No, Joey said simply. He sat beside her, arms around Leia. The three of them were just shapes in the dirt now, shadows clinging to each other. If buzzards circled above, they didn't look up. Martha thought of her husband, Ben Clay, always laughing, always stubborn. She thought of her daughter's singing voice, how it used to echo through the canyons when she was little. She thought of Sunday pies and broken fences, and small joys that now seemed like a different lifetime. God, she whispered. If you're still listening, I could use a little help. The wind picked up. For a moment, she thought she heard something beneath it, a low drumbeat perhaps, but it was just her pulse. Or maybe not. A shadow passed across her face. She opened her eyes and saw feet, bare feet, dark as oiled wood, toes spread confidently in the dirt. She tried to move, instinct kicking in. She thought she'd see a raider, a killer, a ghost from settler nightmares. But the figure crouched instead. A face came into focus. Eyes like obsidian watching her with curiosity more than menace. Skin painted with ochre, feathers tied into his braids, he held out a gourd. Martha stared at it, too stunned to speak. Water, cool water. Drink, he said. The accent was thick, but the word was clear. Joey reached for it and brought it to her lips. It tasted of earth and salvation. Two more figures approached, another man, older, and a woman with a pouch at her side. They said nothing. The woman knelt beside Leia, checking her skin, her breath. The older man helped Martha sit upright, moving gently. Her mind screamed, Comanche. Everything she'd been taught rose in her chest. Stories of raids, of scalps, of merciless savages. But none of these people raised a weapon. None struck her or her grandchildren. The woman hummed a low song, soothing Leia, as she passed a wet cloth over her cheeks. Joey didn't resist when the younger man touched his shoulder. We don't have anything, Martha croaked. No food, no trade. The older man looked at her and spoke in words she couldn't understand. Then, slowly, he touched his chest. Takana, he said. He looked to the woman. Nia. Then to the younger man. Atohi. And finally pointed at her. Martha, she said, almost involuntarily. Martha, he echoed, nodding once. She closed her eyes. Maybe this was a dream, or death, or both. When she opened them again, Nia was binding her ribs with soft cloth. Atohi was cradling Leia in his arms, as if she were his own sister. Takana was drawing symbols in the dirt, pointing toward the ridge and then beyond it. They wanted her to follow. You sure about this? She asked aloud. Nobody answered. She struggled to her feet, wobbled. Atohi caught her without flinching. His hands were calloused but gentle. She looked down at Joey. He looked up at her. We go with him? He asked. She paused. Her whole body screamed no. Every tale, every warning, every night spent in fear of war cries and arrows and blood on the wagon trail. It all said no. But her heart said yes. Yes, she said. We go. And as they walked, the wind shifted. Somewhere far behind them, the dust swallowed up the shallow grave. They didn't look back. The smell of smoke and sweet grass woke Martha before her eyes did. The ache in her ribs had dulled to a constant throb. No longer sharp, just persistent, a reminder she was still alive. Beneath her, the bed was made of woven skins and softened bark, strange yet strangely comfortable. Overhead, a painted canopy of stretched hide filtered the morning light into amber patterns. She sat up slowly. Her hands trembled, but her body obeyed her this time. No chains, no guards, no signs of harm, just silence and warmth. A clay bowl sat nearby, steam rising from its contents. The scent of boiled corn and herbs filled her nose. Her stomach tightened with hunger. A shadow moved at the doorway. No, not a door exactly. It was a flap of hide, pulled back by a girl no older than 15. She stepped in cautiously, holding another bowl, and a soft cloth draped over one arm. Her face was broad and serene, eyes unreadable but not unkind. You, Martha rasped, her voice brittle from thirst. You were there, at the ridge. The girl nodded once and knelt, placing the bowl at Martha's side. Then she dipped the cloth into a smaller vessel, and reached for Martha's hand. Martha flinched. The girl didn't move, just watched. Then slowly, she tapped her own chest. Nia. Martha let out a long breath and nodded. Martha. Nia smiled faintly and went back to work. Her touch was careful as she pressed the cool cloth to Martha's brow, wiped the dust from her cheeks, then offered the food. It was bland but nourishing, and each bite revived her. When the tent flap opened again, two smaller shadows burst in. Grandma. Joa's voice cracked with relief. Leia barreled into her side, clutching her with all the force her little arms could manage. I thought you were dead, Joey whispered. You didn't wake up for a whole day. Martha pulled them close. I'm still too stubborn to die. Behind them stood Takana, framed in morning light, staff in hand, eyes wise and steady. Atohi stood a step behind, arms crossed, his stare harder, colder. He said nothing, but the tension in his shoulders spoke volumes. Takana stepped forward and extended a pouch toward her. Inside were herbs, bits of root, and a small bone charm. He spoke a string of words she couldn't follow, but the tone was kind. I don't understand, she said quietly. Nia rose and translated in broken English. Medicine for pain. You strong woman. Heal. Martha nodded slowly. Thank you. Takana bowed his head once and turned away. Atohi lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking over her, then Joey, then Leia. He looked at Nia and muttered something sharp before exiting. What did he say? Martha asked. Nia hesitated. He not sure. Not trust yet. You white. Martha swallowed hard. That truth weighed heavier than the pain in her ribs. Over the following days, they stayed in the camp, nestled between sandstone cliffs and river bends. Tents and shelters rose like bones of the earth, stitched into the land rather than laid upon it. The Comanche didn't just live here, they belonged to it. Joey learned first. He rode with the boys, watched how they threw spears and painted their faces. Leia followed Nia like a duckling, learning the names of flowers, how to weave reeds into circles, how to hum lullabies without words. Martha, meanwhile, sat beside fires and listened. She listened to stories carved in rhythm, to drums that spoke in thunder, to grief held close and joy shared freely. She wasn't used to stillness. Her whole life had been motion, cooking, hauling, teaching, nursing, surviving. Now she was forced to rest, to observe. And in that slowness, she saw. These people weren't the monsters from settler campfire tales. They were cautious, yes, proud, certainly, but they were also generous, especially with those who had nothing to offer but thanks. Still, not everyone welcomed her. A Tohi avoided her. When they crossed paths, he gave a nod. Nothing more. Once, she heard him speaking in clipped tones with Takana. She caught one word, puha. Stranger. Outsider. One evening, as the sky flushed gold and shadows stretched long, she sat near the central fire. Nia joined her, humming softly as she sorted roots. Why does he hate me? Martha asked. Nia paused. His brother killed by settlers. Burned house. A Tohi only one live. I'm sorry, Martha said. But the words felt empty. He know you not same, Nia said softly. But still, hurt runs deep. That night, Takana joined Martha by the fire. He sat without ceremony and gazed at the stars. You come from a land of fences, he said, his English slow but careful. Fences in the dirt, fences in the heart. Martha didn't deny it. He picked up a branch and traced a circle in the dust. This place, no fences. No mine, no yours. We belong to it. Not the other way. She considered that, thought of the graves they'd left behind. The towns that claimed ownership of land they didn't understand. Thought of how much she'd been taught, and how much of it was wrong. I'm trying to learn, she said. He looked at her, nodded once. Then you are welcome. Later, she returned to the tent where Leia lay curled beside Joey. The children were asleep, their faces soft and open. She brushed a lock of hair from Leia's brow and sat beside them, watching the firelight flicker through the hide. Outside, laughter rose from the nearby tents. The Comanche was celebrating the arrival of spring rains. Drums thudded like heartbeats. Children danced with painted cheeks. Women clapped in rhythm. The air smelled of roasted meat and wildflowers. Nia approached with 2 bowls. One she placed in Martha's hands. The other she held herself. They sat together, eating, not speaking. After a while, Nia pointed to a mark on Martha's wrist, a faded scar. Fire, she asked. Martha smiled faintly. Kettle burn. Long ago. Nia showed her a scar of her own, just above her knee, a curved line like a crescent moon. Fell. He 2 women laughed, a quiet sound that belonged to the night. But peace, Martha knew, was always borrowed in these parts. Never owned. 3 days later, the quiet broke. A Tohi rode in hard, his horse lathered, his face cut and bleeding. He slid from the saddle and shouted before he hit the ground. Warriors rose. Women gathered their children. The air thickened. Takana stepped forward, calm but firm. Martha rushed from her tent, the children behind her. She saw the blood, saw the tension. "What's happening?" she asked. Nia stood near, her face pale. "Riders coming," she said. "Guns?" "Many." Martha's stomach dropped. "Settlers?" Nia nodded. A Tohi spat into the dust. "They say we take white woman. They want her back." Martha looked at her grandchildren. Their faces were tight with fear. "Will they fight?" Joey asked. "Yes," Takana said. The tribe began to prepare, not with panic, but with focus. Spears were sharpened, bows strung. A Tohi donned war paint with steady hands. Martha stood frozen, watching it all unfold. Nia took her hand. "They fight for you, 4 children. I didn't ask them to." "No," Nia said. "But you stayed. That matters." Martha stared out at the horizon, where the riders would come. She felt the weight of every decision she'd made, every scar she carried, every mile she'd walked from who she used to be. She took a breath and turned to Takana. "What do you want me to do?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "Stand with us." The fire behind him crackled like thunder. The sun dipped low, red and unforgiving. Dust rose on the horizon. Martha squared her shoulders. "I will." The sun rose angry and red, bleeding across the sky like a warning. Every breath the camp took that morning felt like it could be the last. Children were sent to the far canyon wall with the elders. Horses were painted with white handprints. Faces bore streaks of ash and ochre. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Martha stood near the edge of the village beside a Tohi, watching the line of riders grow clearer in the distance. Dust curled behind them like smoke from a lit fuse. 10, maybe 12 men, all armed, all white. One wore a red kerchief around his throat. Another had a shotgun slung across his chest like a badge. "They'll shoot first," a Tohi muttered. "They always do." Martha's fists clenched. Her palms were raw from practicing with the old bow Takana had given her. She wasn't good, not even close, but she could hold it now without shaking. That was something. "They are not here for a fight," she said quietly. "Not at first." A Tohi glanced at her, skeptical. "You think they'll talk?" "No," she said, her voice steady. "But they'll pretend to." Takana emerged from the central tent, tall and straight as an old pine. He wore a long, feathered mantle, eyes sharp, staff in hand. A Tohi fell in beside him without a word. Martha followed. Her knees trembled, but her steps did not falter. The riders stopped 30 paces from the camp. One man kicked his horse forward. He was younger than she expected, early 30s, with a patchy beard and pale eyes that looked over the camp like it was meat on a spit. "You the chief," he called to Takana. Takana didn't blink. "I speak." The man sneered. "That old woman and them kids. You got 'em. They are from our train. Left 'em behind on account of the woman being half dead. Looks like she ain't. So we come to fetch what's ours." Martha stepped forward. I'm not yours. The rider blinked, surprised to hear her voice. He said, his voice suddenly syrupy. We thought you was done for. We're real sorry about leaving like we did. But you understand, it was the vote. Folks got scared. Lot of mouths to feed. You didn't vote. You just left. Her words were low and razored. And now you ride in with guns drawn, expecting thanks. We came to get you safe. The right way, the man replied, spitting to the side. But you staying here with them, that's no place for Christian folk. Takana raised his staff, but Atohe held out a hand. Let her speak, he murmured. Martha stepped closer. You don't get to pretend you're righteous, she said, her voice ringing across the space. You left my daughter to die. You left me broken. These people, she turned toward Takana, toward Nia, toward the others who had gathered in silence behind her, they picked us up. They carried us, fed us, healed us. She turned back to the rider. You want me, you'll have to take me. His smile twisted into something meaner. You calling us thieves now? I'm calling you cowards. He jerked his reins and turned to his men. Grab her. If they move, shoot. Atohe's bow was up before the order left the man's lips. His arrow buried itself in the dirt between the rider's horse and Martha's feet. A warning, not a miss. All hell broke loose. One of the riders fired, too eager. The crack of the shot echoed off the cliffs, scattering birds into the sky. Warriors moved like shadows, slipping between rocks and tents. Arrows flew fast and silent. Horses screamed. Dust turned to smoke. Martha ducked behind a low wall, pulling Joey and Leia with her. A bullet tore through a nearby tent. Leia screamed, but Martha held her tight. We stay down. You hear me, she said, voice shaking but firm. Joey nodded, his hand gripping a rock, eyes wide with terrified fire. Atohe charged the center, spear in one hand, knife in the other. His face was painted with a line down the middle, black on one side, red on the other. Death and blood. His blade found the thigh of a rider pulling his pistol, knocking the man from his saddle. Takana stood tall in the chaos, staff raised high. He didn't move, didn't blink. Around him, others rallied. The village fought not like a militia, but like the land itself, steady, unpredictable, and full of fury. One settler tried to flank around a tent. Martha spotted him and, without thinking, raised the bow Takana had given her. Her fingers fumbled the string. She loosed too early. The arrow glanced off a barrel. The man turned toward her, grinning. He raised his revolver. A blur flew from the side. Atohe tackled him into the dirt, knocking the gun from his hand. They struggled, fists and elbows, until Atohe's blade found purchase beneath the man's ribs. Martha stared, heart pounding. Blood soaked the dust in seconds. Atohe looked at her, not with pride, not with. Another shot cracked. Takana fell. The bullet took him in the shoulder. He dropped to one knee. Warriors rushed to his side, dragging him back. The line wavered. The lead rider, still mounted, still grinning, shouted something, raising his shotgun. Martha rose. She didn't think. She didn't feel brave. She just stood. The man saw her, raised his weapon. His final arrow flew. It caught the man in the throat. He made a soft, surprised sound and toppled backward off his horse. The rest of the riders hesitated, just for a moment. That was all it took. The Comanche pressed forward with cries that filled the plain. Horses turned, breaking the line. Men shouted. 2 more fell. The others ran. It was over as quickly as it began. The battlefield was quiet now. Just moans and the soft rustle of wind through trampled grass. Martha dropped her bow and knelt beside Takana. He was conscious, grimacing, blood soaking his cloak. "You'll live," she said. "We all will." He smiled faintly, then closed his eyes. Atohi sat nearby, his hands shaking for the first time. Nia brought water. Joey and Leia ran to Martha, burying themselves in her arms. She held them tightly. Above, the sky had turned clear again, scrubbed of fire and smoke. Later that night, they burned the bodies far from the camp, beneath a stand of juniper trees. The tribe sang songs of mourning and thanks, old words that held pain and pride in equal measure. Martha stood beside Atohi as the flames danced. "You didn't have to save me," she said quietly. "I didn't," he replied. "I saved us." They stood in silence for a while. Then Atohi turned to her. "You drew a line today." "I didn't have a choice." He nodded. "Now you do." She looked out into the desert beyond the firelight. The same dust that had nearly killed her had now become sacred. Soaked with blood, with truth, with change. She drew in a breath. Tomorrow, they would bury the weapons, rebuild the tents, prepare for the next rain. Life would go on. But tonight, they stood together, no longer strangers, just survivors. Smoke curled upward from the last of the funeral fires, its ghostly tendrils trailing into the twilight sky. The camp was quieter now. The songs had faded. The drums were still. Only the crackle of flames and the distant howl of coyotes remained to fill the silence. It wasn't just grief that held the air heavy. It was transformation, thick and undeniable, like the moment a storm breaks and nothing is ever quite the same. Martha stood alone at the edge of the canyon, her silhouette carved against the dying light. Her dress was torn, her hands calloused, her arms marked with healing scratches, but she stood tall, taller than she ever had in her years behind a hearth or nursing the sick with quiet obedience. For the first time, she was not anyone's shadow. Behind her, the village began its slow return to rhythm. Nia moved between tents, whispering comfort to the wounded and fetching water with steady hands. Joey had taken to helping the other boys gather firewood, learning to whistle like they did, short and sharp, full of hidden meaning. Leia sat beside Takana, who rested beneath the medicine tree, his shoulders still bandaged, but his eyes alert as ever. She told him stories, ones she barely remembered from before the crossing, tales of dogs that danced and stars that could talk if you listened hard enough. Atohi watched from the outskirts, sharpening a blade that no longer needed use. His face was unreadable, his movements precise, his gaze flicking now and then toward Martha. It had been 3 days since the attack. 3 days since blood soaked the dust. 3 days since everything changed. A meeting had been called beneath the sacred tree. Elders gathered on woven mats, younger warriors stood behind, and the fire between them burned low and steady. Martha was invited, not as a guest, but as a witness. She sat beside a towhee, unfamiliar words flowing around her like wind through grass. But she didn't need to speak their language to understand. Tension hummed through every gesture, every glance. They were deciding. Would the tribe stay or move further south? Would they hide, as they had done before, or would they fight again? She listened, watched. Takana, wounded though he was, spoke last. His voice was gravel and wisdom. He gestured once at the blood-stained ridge, then toward Martha. When silence settled, all eyes turned to her. She stood slowly. "I don't know what gives me the right to speak here," she said. "But I will, because I must." The firelight caught the lines in her face, the hollows of her eyes, the iron behind them. "I was raised to believe the frontier belonged to those who could take it. That the land was empty if it didn't wear boots or speak English, that anything different was dangerous." She let the words settle. "I know now that was a lie. You aren't dangerous. You are alive, more alive than any town behind a wall." She looked at each face in turn. "You saved my family when no one else would. Not out of pity, out of something stronger. I don't have land to offer. I don't have weapons. But I do have this." She stepped forward, voice steady, soul burning. "If they come again, I will not run. I will stand with you." A murmur rippled through the gathering. Atohi said nothing, but he bowed his head slightly. Not in agreement, in respect. That night, the drums returned, not for mourning, but for memory, for strength, for those who had fallen and for those who had risen. Martha danced for the first time, clumsy but free. Her bare feet struck the earth not as an outsider, but as someone rooted. Joey and Leia joined her, laughter spilling from their mouths like music. Around them, warriors painted new lines on their arms, symbols of protection and survival. Life surged again. But peace, as always, was fleeting. It came in the form of smoke on the horizon, a new column, dark and rising fast. This time, it wasn't just a dozen settlers. A full wagon train approached, banners waving, riders scouting the edges, armed, organized. And they weren't just passing through. They were building. Within a day, fences appeared, trees were felled, tents pitched, claims staked in the dirt with iron nails and the arrogance of permanence. A flag flew at the center, white with a red cross. A preacher led morning songs. Women cooked in copper pots. Men built with rifles slung across their backs. It was a town in the making. Too close. Too sure of its place. Takana called the council again. Scouts reported what they'd seen. These weren't just settlers. They were veterans, men who'd fought in the war, and weren't looking for peace. "What do they want?" Joey asked. Atohi answered, his voice like stone. "All of it." Martha watched the faces around her. Fear lingered, but so did fury. She rose. "We can't outgun them," she said. "But we don't have to." She pointed to the ridge. "That canyon, that river bend. That's our ground. We know it. They don't." Takana nodded, the fire returning to his eyes. Like the buffalo hunts. Not with force, with skill. The next day, they prepared not for battle, but for disruption. They became ghosts. Riders found their water stores poisoned with cactus milk. Tools vanished in the night. Fences were cut, then rebuilt in circles. Horses spooked at unseen movements. Wagons rolled into false paths and broke their wheels on hidden stones. No one was killed, but no one slept soundly either. The settlers grew restless. The preacher ranted about devils and wild savages. One morning, they woke to find their flag burned, replaced by a line of red handprints. Martha was there for all of it. She moved through the brush with Nia, stole ropes, and left stones in their place. Joey carved signs into trees to lead scouts the wrong way. Leia helped distract guards with songs from the canyon ledges. They weren't just surviving now. They were fighting back, with fire in their hearts. But the settlers didn't leave. Not yet. One evening, a scout returned, breathless. They are planning something. At dawn, no one needed to ask what. Takana gathered the warriors. Atohi handed Martha a blade. Not the ceremonial kind. Real steel, balanced and sharp. You may need it, he said simply. She looked him in the eyes. So might you. The night passed in silence. No drums, no fire. At dawn, fog blanketed the land. A gift from the spirits, Martha thought. One last shroud. The settlers came as expected, marching, guns ready. But the camp was empty. Or so it seemed. They entered, slow, then movement, a cry. A wall of arrows from above. Warriors burst from the mist like wraiths. Horses reared. Men screamed. Chaos again, but this time controlled. Precision and fury wrapped in smoke. Martha fought beside Atohi, blade raised. One settler rushed her, young, scared. She dodged his swing and struck his leg, dropping him. He scrambled away, eyes wide. She let him go. It wasn't about killing. It was about ending it. Takana stood tall on the canyon rise, staff raised high. He called out once, loud and clear. Behind him, fire bloomed. Not on people, on the settler supplies, wagons, food, ammunition. Gone in an instant. The settlers broke, fully, completely. They ran, not toward the camp, but away from it, into the desert, into their own uncertainty. By noon, they were gone. All of them. The village stood silent for a long time. Then cheers, cries of triumph, of survival. Martha stood in the center, blade in hand, hair wild, face streaked with dust and tears. Atohi approached. He didn't smile, but he offered her his hand. She took it. Weeks passed. The village rebuilt again, stronger, deeper in the canyon, hidden but not afraid. Children played, water ran clean, songs returned. One morning, Takana summoned Martha. He handed her a small carving, an eagle with a flame at its chest. You have fire, he said. Not just in hand, in soul. She closed her fingers around it. I learned it from you, she replied. He smiled, and she turned to the children beside her, Joey with his wooden spear, Leia weaving a braid into Nia's hair. They were safe, for now. But more would come, always, and she would be ready. She had once been left for dead. Now she lived fiercely, not just with the fire around her, but with the fire within.